we might spend the extra dollar on $10 for recycled paper because it's good for the planet and the people on the planet that are our customers, right? It's not this selfish look at just profit, profit, profit. It's people, planet, and profit can all coexist. That's the triple bottom line. And I think it's hard to embed that in people's minds because although it's only $1 for the recycling, I mean, maybe it's the container systems, the paper from the copier, maybe it's the water on the roof that is collected for the landscaping. So as a quick example, it's crazy that we use this incredible filtration and technology to have potable drinking water all across the United States. And every day we are just pumping hundreds of millions of gallons into landscaping, right?
Welcome to Sustainability Transformations podcast, where we explore bold ideas to drive positive change for people, the community, and business. Today's guest is inventive, mission-driven, ESG pioneer, honest-oriented, and a triple bottom line thinker. Charlie Szoradi is a sustainability entrepreneur and founder of OnlyKale, a new venture making superfoods affordable, accessible, and easy to integrate into everyday life. And the key goal of our discussion, or the theme, is bridging sustainable food innovation and wellness. Charlie, thank you for joining us. You've worked across energy, real estate, and now nutrition. What connects your 30-year sustainability journey?
Well, Enoch, thank you for hosting and having me. I really applaud everything you've done with your career, and I see a lot of alignment there because sustainability is not just an electric car or a solar house. It's the whole way we think about living and working on this beautiful planet of ours in some cooperative way with the other plants and animals. It's a non-selfish way of thinking about life, and it can also lead to profitable businesses and happiness, not just protect the planet. The planet, ironically, as you may know, is going to be okay. It's actually save us, not save the earth. So I'll start by saying thank you, but then just give you a quick little update. You know, back in the 80s, late 80s, I was at the University of Virginia studying architecture, worked for a couple years in Washington, D.C., and was then inspired at the University of Pennsylvania for my master's degree as an architect by Kinya Maruyama, who is a great Japanese thinker for sustainability. This is early 90s, and I had the unbelievable good fortune to work with him in Tokyo. And I started to see that sustainability was about living well as opposed to a perception of it just being sort of a green or liberal cause to save something. It was about wealth, health, and all those good things that could come from connecting and knowing the complexity of the ecosystem. The pivot for me came when I realized that architecture alone, and I have a solar house that I built here in Wayne, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia, one at the beach down at our Jersey Shore house, and an electric car. And I thought those are all great things, and grew some food at home. And I realized that the buildings themselves are not going to solve the problem. As an architect, inside those buildings, there were the lights, and I pivoted towards making LED lights. And this was about 15 years ago, before LEDs were even popular. At the big box stores, there were no aisles that had LED lights. Like maybe there would be a headlamp if you went biking at night. You know, it was crazy. So pioneering that with a patent and a production facility here in the U.S. was great. Navy ships, military bases, Walter Reed Hospital, all under contract with our U.S.-made LED lights that honestly saved 90% of the energy. They cost more, but we could justify the math on how it was a return on investment that was very favorable, payback within a few years. During that time, the food trigger started because some people were calling in from California about using the lights to grow plants. Controlled environment agriculture has a burden of electrical bills, right? If you're not using the sun, which is free, you got to pay the electric bill. It was first, by the way, the cannabis guys that are on the bleeding edge of technology for California, but also around the world. And I realized you could also grow romaine lettuce. You grow the leafy greens like the kale, and the kale caught my eye. The kale caught my eye because it is the most nutrient-dense superfood on Earth. Good for bones, good for heart, good for the immune system, skin, eyes, hair, detox. It was like, wow, pharma, with all their trillions of dollars, can't really do what Mother Nature can do in terms of producing something so simple and powerful for health. Okay, pivoted, started finding the ways to move the kale, and it looked like refrigeration was one of the challenges. So in transportation, if you have to keep something cold, people forget that almost 90% of the veggies are coming from California, and I'm all the way over here in Philly. That's over 2,000 miles. The burden on the environment is so real for making and transporting food that it's about a 23 to 24% impact on greenhouse gas emissions. It's a shocking number because buildings might be 6%, cars and transportation might be 12. It's more of a burden on the planet to make and move food than just about anything else. So growing locally was one option, but not always easy. And I'm going to wrap this sort of narrative in a second because it was as simple as looking at how to powderize something so good as kale. We looked at dehydrating. You lose 30 or 40% of the nutrients. That's not dissimilar to the nutrients that are lost when you move leaf kale across the country for multiple days. Freeze drying was the answer, preserving 97% of the nutrients. We put the freeze drying on the farms, we powderize it, and we can ship it at 1/10 of the weight and shelf stable. No refrigeration needs. So this was the breakthrough moment in the last 2 years. And it was the inspiration for OnlyKale, which now it comes in single serve stick packs, powder that you can just mix into any drink. And the idea, it's really pretty simple. If you make something fast and easy and affordable for someone that's less than, 75 cents a day, all of a sudden you can adopt change, whether it's in the underserved communities or whether it's for the wealthy suburban families that want to have a healthier lifestyle. We don't care. We want to help everyone. And we tried to make it as affordable as possible and work also with some nonprofits to try and make it even more meaningful for people in the food deserts, in the underserved communities. There's the quick Charlie story. It took a little longer than I had planned, but I hope that helps put in perspective the journey I've been on.
It's a fascinating journey, and there are a number of areas we can explore. What is that freeze drying again that you finally discovered? If you can unpack what
Yeah,
that
so
looks
freeze
like.
drying, it goes back to some of the NASA programs, way back into the in the 60s and even before. But the idea is, if in a vacuum you can take out the moisture is a significant portion of the weight, and if you can do that under the vacuum pressure without removing the nutrients, all the better. So dehydrating. And I bought some initially for myself for testing dehydration machines. That's taking out the moisture as well, Enoch. But what it does is in that process, it's losing some of those nutrients. And that's where, we're so proud of our nutrient like fact sheet and being able to basically have the vitamins D, A, E, B6, the things that help and the antioxidants. So it's not just about like less weight. You have to try and preserve the good stuff. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time.
That's impressive. So you were in ESG before it became a buzzword. What was the earliest spark for sustainable business thinking, would you say?
So it's so interesting because I was, I think, at the forefront in some way because I was able to do some things that weren't just like a solar house. And this is way back, coming into, I think it was one of the first properties in Pennsylvania that didn't look like a solar house. So part of the challenge with technology is, I'll just take the example of the Cybertruck that Tesla makes. It clearly does not look like anything else. That's fine and good, but I think they were relatively smart with something like the S and the Model 3 to make them feel kind of sporty and look like something you would be happy to drive. Now, the politics of what's happening with Musk and Tesla is going to be a separate podcast. We're not going to go there today, but the idea is to make something that is functional, but also aesthetic and then sustainable. So if it's something that's a burden to use in terms of the function, maybe I don't care as much that it's helping the planet. If it's not affordable, I don't know if I'm going to go that deep. And then some of the things that we love just don't help the planet at all, right? The traditional, like, say, combustion engines or the houses that burn through so much fuel. So the way I did the breakthrough was not only solar for making electricity on a house that looked pretty traditional and was appealing to a lot of people, but had hot water systems. So I would not just make the electrons, say for the air conditioning, but designed it with operable windows for cross ventilation. So you could get some free aspect of what Mother Earth provides, which is a breeze in the evening and maybe the morning, even on very hot days. And then heated the water, not just for the showers and the laundry, but with separate panels, all facing south, all at the right angle. And they heat the floor through a radiant floor heating system with coils under the tile. Had a 400-gallon tank, much bigger than a traditional tank that was like a storage system with copper coils in it. And so the combination of feeding the water system for the floors, the domestic hot water, a trigger backup was an on-demand system. And this is, again, coming up on, like 20 years ago when I got this house and renovated, started all the work. Those backups were as important as the primary, meaning no one wants the great sustainable house that, in my case, made with my wife then and kids, the cover of Inventor's Digest magazine. Right. So it wasn't like Good Housekeeping. This was like the Inventor's magazine. The backups were just as important because if you don't have hot water in the shower, or if you had the wrong type of shower head that doesn't feel like you have enough pressure, no one wants it. So part of the challenge in the early ESG days were this perception that it was going to be less quality, less of a lifestyle benefit, less of a sort of a wealthy living, kind of play. And I found that balance for what was at the time $125 square foot to build, which was less than the average of the suburban builder houses. So it was affordable, it was sustainable, it was functional, and it was aesthetic. Check those boxes, and off we went.
That's impressive with all of those initial uptake. So the definition of sustainability have recently sort of struggled with. Different people seem to have different definition of what sustainability is. And perhaps there might be, oh no, sustainability is not enough. We have to be regenerative. We have to be circular economy, or the difference between sustainability and ESG. I'm curious to know how you define sustainability across design, energy, and now health.
So I love the Native American story about 7 generations, and their definition of sustainability was to think of the actions we take have an impact on those that follow us. And if you can do something that will not adversely impact the 7th generation, now you have adopted a sustainability mindset. So the small act I did of becoming a personal trainer with the National Academy of Sports Medicine is a need that I have for myself to learn about health and wellness for physical fitness. That will only have an impact for 7 generations if I teach my children about balancing their diet and exercise and those things, and they teach their children. But for sure, that action that I took will not have a negative impact. It will have a positive impact. It's just a question of how much. Designing the house and telling the kids all about the thing so that they can share those stories with their friends is an act of sustainability, because I would then invite Boy Scout, Girl Scout troops in. It would drive my wife then absolutely crazy because it was like a Tuesday afternoon and I'm like giving tours and we had to like clean up the house. And the point is, I was thinking about those 7th generations that maybe they tell their children who tell their children. And we start to think that when you buy a product, when you make something, even with the LED lights, that for literally a decade, we had the longest running warranty, 10-year warranty, and everyone else was 3 or 5 years. Longest running, most environmentally friendly lights in the history of the world. And someone will continue to do that because once you pay the lower bill, you're probably not going to go back to a higher cost operating light bulb. That idea of 7 generations is, I think, important. What you do should not have a negative impact on people or the planet. And if anything, it should create a lift.
Right. So that's fascinating with those 7 generations. So could it be that traditional leadership thinking or leadership styles need a revamp to for example, the 7th generation in order for sustainability to thrive from whether government leadership or business leadership? the traditional ways of leadership to change the mindset.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you that it's not a big paradigm shift, it's a pivot. And so here's what's interesting. With a for-profit business, you're supposed to, as an executive, and I'm the CEO of OnlyKale, think of your shareholders first. So if you were going to buy a ream of paper for the copy machine, you should technically buy the least expensive stack of 500 sheets, whatever it is, as opposed to the recycled paper, which might cost 10% more. So by mandate, in some way, to preserve shareholder value, we have set a pattern of rules that is not beneficial to the collective, meaning other people and often the planet, habitants, plants, and animals. The nonprofit company does not have those same rules, and they could support the purchase of a recycled set of copy paper. What's interesting with B Corp, and there's a bridge, and this is a Philadelphia-based group that I was pleased to sign the Declaration of Interdependence back in like 2007. It's a middle ground. It's saying you can be a for-profit business, but you add a bylaw language strip in your agreement, your operating agreement, that says we are sometimes going to take the high road. We might spend the extra dollar on $10 for recycled paper because it's good for the planet and the people on the planet that are our customers, right? It's not this selfish look at just profit, profit, profit. It's people, planet, and profit can all coexist. That's the triple bottom line. And I think it's hard to embed that in people's minds because although it's only $1 for the recycling, I mean, maybe it's the container systems, the paper from the copier, maybe it's the water on the roof that is collected for the landscaping. So as a quick example, it's crazy that we use this incredible filtration and technology to have potable drinking water all across the United States. And every day we are just pumping hundreds of millions of gallons into landscaping, right? That doesn't necessarily need that level of cost to basically filter the water. Rainwater collection tanks, and I have them at our residence, are awesome for landscape water, right? You've gotten in the cycle of earth. So that's not a cost. That's actually saving money. It seems like a green thing, but you have to spend the money on the barrel once, collect the water, and run it into the system. And the barrels could be massive at a corporate office. So when I see roofs, I'm imagining that like they could be growing vegetables locally to feed their group for the lunch. They could be collecting rainwater. They could be making electricity with the solar. So it's like our mindset has been status quo, pay the electric bill, pay the water bill. It's crazy. It's like crazy when the asset exists and for free it rains. At some point it will rain, even in the driest, places. So there's Charlie's approach. Tweak the rule. Don't always make the corporate required to just think bottom line in the short term, but think about investing in efficiency and the future.
That's so inspirational because when people think about sustainability and they have to come up with a new initiative, for some reason, the initial thought goes to the most expensive, but not thinking about, as you mentioned, rainwater harvesting. Yes, you make some investment, but compared to other initiatives which you can take up so quickly. So that's great. You've shared how you've moved from the LEDs and the HVAC optimization to the OnlyKale. But was there personal or market insight which really inspired you to pivot into the superfood space?
So it was interesting. What my father had come from Budapest, Hungary in the 50s after the war and escaped through the Iron Curtain as an architect. And I was at his feet at the drafting table in the 70s, drawing in like the trees on the architectural presentations for some of the solar projects that he was working on as an architect. So I was inspired by someone who had been there at the very earliest stages and then built with two friends from high school in 8th grade, a solar boat that won the popular prize for the science fair. So I had read it was Jimmy Carter had put the solar panels on the White House. Turns out later Reagan took them off, but that's separate also podcast. I thought this was cool. We could use them for transportation, that solar was going to be the future of everything. And this is now coming up on like not quite, but almost 50 years ago. And so I was inspired at a young age to see the potential for innovative architecture, innovative technologies, and with efficiencies. We were told to turn the lights off when we left the room and the TVs off. And with the thermostat, It was before there were really smart thermostats, but I learned from my dad then that you didn't need at night for the heating cost as much demand, because if you were under your blankets, you could turn it down a little bit and that would save some energy. And with the air conditioning, if we weren't going to be there because I was at school during the day, mom was a teacher and dad went off to work as the architect, the air conditioning we would turn back up when we got back to the house. Now, today with the various technologies, you can have it automated and the timer could set it at, whatever, 5:30 p.m. It would pre-cool some of your house. How to open the windows and get the draft in the evening. So these were the beginnings for HVAC for me, the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. And I would now work actually as an advisor consultant for a company that uses very sophisticated algorithms to save energy for major corporate buildings by doing those little micro adjustments. So those small things I was learning about them at such an early age that it sort of became obvious that other people should do this. And I was shocked at the lack of adoption because it was perceived, I think, as a liberal cause. And I hated that it was like Earth Day and everything became sort of a green hippie thing, that it was branded and pushed to be polar to like this sort of conservative mindset. I'm like, it's the most conservative thing ever to save energy, right? Like, I'm shocked to this day that the message hasn't been adopted to be smart, clean technology for America that's efficient, that we could all get behind instead of making it somehow a political debate. Shouldn't be a debate at all. We should save money and save the planet and live better, period.
Absolutely. I mean, conserve is conservative. So,
Exactly.
so what makes OnlyKale different? Because we've got a few green powders in the market. Can you help the listeners try and pinpoint the key
Absolutely. There
aspects
are
here?
so many supplements now. We have what is called a crowded space. And if you look at the packaging, there are lots of layers in terms of ingredients. So let's take first the idea of total body solutions. So there are lots of powders, whether they're green, yellow, blue, pink, doesn't matter, that claim to do all kinds of things for like anti-aging and, meal replacement, and it's overwhelming to consumers. And we thought about a spoke on the wheel, that you need to eat actual food, preferably whole food, whether it's grass-fed beef, whether it's, poultry that is free range, or vegetables that are grown locally. Unfortunately, you have to spend sometimes a little more money to get the quality that's not overloaded with, pesticides and all kinds of high processed stuff. But we thought the simplicity of the word only and kale was 100% organic kale powder, and you choose how to mix it in. In my case, I just have it every day. I'm drinking it now with water. In the morning, whey protein. Perhaps you have an organic protein that's veggie based. Mix it in, and it's just a tear the top right in the shaker. No blender needed. I'll have collagen, for skin. I'll have creatine for working out, and it's just shake it up and off we go. And the families that have, let's just say, kids that don't love veggies, you can put it in lasagna. You can throw it in the soup. You can throw it in the salad dressing. And all of a sudden, there's a way to get what is the equivalent of one serving of kale so fast and easy and affordably. And now you don't have to have the consternation and the stress like my kids maybe didn't get their 3 servings of veggies because there's sometimes just less time in the day. So we decided to go narrow, narrow, narrow and have it be a single serve and a single product that is the most nutrient dense food, and not jumble up the offering with all kinds of like added flavors, added other nutrients. People take their multivitamin pills. There's plenty of ways to get other nutrients, but don't think of it as a solution to solve all your problems. It's a spoke on the wheel. And if you ride that bike and the wheel goes nice and smoothly down the path, you will go further.
That's good. So how are you solving the accessibility and the affordability in the health food market?
Great question. So what happens when we'll go by 50,000 units, the stick packs are not individually made by hand, right? We have automation and machines. We have our partner for co-packing in San Diego with solar on the roof and a net zero delivery on the impact for actually the production of our product. Very, very unique in this space. That had everything to do with my initial instinct with the 7 generations to make sure that we can stick with what we believe and not greenwash. There are plenty of people that talk about, why they're doing green things. And it's kind of like, if you pull the cover up, you're like, that's not quite the same deal. So this is about human health and wellness and planetary health and wellness coexisting right there. At scale, we can pass all that saving advantage on to the consumer. We're not making a big profit, at some massive level. I have envy of let's just say the software Microsofts of the world, where they make it once and then when it scales, they just make so much money, right? The profit. This one, we have to make each time, but at least there's some machines that, that put the powder in, and we're not handcrafting each little stick pack. So that's how we can get to the affordability. And with the internet, there's less middlemen. So one of the challenges with retail is they buy it often for 50% of what they charge the retail buyer. On the internet, we can get it out the door typically for less. And that way we're still making some money to pay for overhead. And one of the things we need to do with some of those dollars is also work with these underserved communities, because it's not just the North Philadelphia, the Baltimore, parts of Atlanta, Detroit. Every city has some area where there's often a food desert, meaning you're further than a mile to walk to a grocery store that has some actual vegetables.
Right.
And that's a real problem, because 90% of the United States is not getting enough vegetables each day, the full 3 servings. And in the inner city and some of these underserved rural communities as well, it's much, much worse. With obesity levels going up, with diabetes, I don't think I need to tell you, Enoch, it's good to eat some vegetables each day.
Yes.
And we're a crutch in that wheel to get you there.
Yeah. Regarding the greenwashing, I've looked into why some companies fall into the trap. And one of the areas is a lot of companies come up with the idea of being sustainable. There's no action. And then once they come up with the idea of sustainability, they may get a few awards, they may get a few buzz. And then when it comes to actually delivering the idea, then a few companies start to backtrack, because and some will start to say, oh, we didn't realize it was going to cost us this much, or we needed to make some investments and so on. So that's kind of interesting.
You touched on something, that they have a sustainability plan and it looks all good on the internet. And you're like, where are the actual action items that might include having at their break room, like the filtered water? So they'll buy, it drives me nuts, the single serve plastic water bottles as a courtesy for the staff, which is producing these 9 billion bottles, a year of trash that end up in the ocean and our food supply chain, as opposed to a filtered water system where they tell their staff, I'm going to buy you, like, instead of just a glass, maybe a canister, like one of those aluminum canisters that has the company logo on it, just fill it up with water for free from the water filter. Yeah, it's like the number of plastic and the self-serve stuff. I mean, the single serve is absolutely insane. We like having the idea of food on demand, whether you can grow some on the roof, whether you can have the kale powder there for your staff if they need a little energy, some veggies in the afternoon. But like, I would enjoy consulting to some of those big shot corporations, as I did with the lighting and the air conditioning efficiency, to say, here are 10 things you can do that might even include like blinds for the windows on the southern exposure that just in the afternoon reduce some of the heat gain. And little tiny things like having a garden on the roof to grow some veggies for the handful of the staff that might want to volunteer to participate is a show of participation, right? Is someone in charge of pushing one button, or is it even automated with a photocell to like close some blinds so you're not overheating the building? Save a little energy. Harvest, which is super fun for me, clipping some veggies and bringing them down to throw in your salad at lunch. That idea of being engaged with architecture is actually in my book, the Learn from Looking book, which is active living versus passive living in buildings. Opening the shutters in the old farmhouse to let the light in, right? The participation of how you might imagine planting a deciduous tree that has shade in the summer but loses its leaves in the winter on the south side of your house, which we did. Knowing that you're just not in a box living, but you're actively participating in life is different. Scoop out the rainwater from the rain barrel or something. You're watering one of the house plants. Like living in a way that is dynamic and not just hoping you pull up your phone and click an app and food magically shows up with Grubhub at your door, right? Growing, cutting, cooking, participating with the kids. And that's a whole mindset of active living, not passive living.
You worked with Fortune 100, which are some of the successful companies around the world, and the US military. What lessons from those work did you bring into this consumer-facing product, the OnlyKale?
So it was basically the mindset of make it accessible and fun, and kind of like even the logo like is whimsical. Like the Fortune 500, the leading companies 100 in the world have done things that attract consumers, as opposed to sometimes the perception of like the nonprofit and the do-gooders. So we try to do something that felt super accessible in terms of the branding, the social media, people having fun, people showing off how they're living better, doing things, not this like beat down of like, we need to do this because it's an existential threat to humans if we don't. I had the good fortune of meeting Al Gore multiple times, and as the author of The Inconvenient Truth, had discussions that were simply like, we have to be careful not to put people on their heels and get defensive about driving their SUV, which they love, with the kids in the suburbs. So if you antagonize people, I think the answer to your question about what we've learned is don't piss people off, right? So if we can come in with a positive message, and on the box, like they come in, and it's a box of 15, but the energy and the bones and the skin and the heart and the recovery, if people are working out, it's a way to get better. It's immunity, eyes, hair, detox, and weight loss. Well, all these things are great. And, the disclaimer is the FDA has it's self-policed with the way that we're not expecting anyone believes FDA makes all these claims, and does the cross-checking. But it's interesting if you make claims, with the disclaimer, we have to be sensitive to all that stuff. It's the supplement disclaimer. Follow the rules. We also learned from the top corporations in the world. Play in the field that is fair and be sensitive to those rules, but don't make people feel bad for not buying some product. It's a optimistic message versus a pessimistic message.
So essential, and it's been a common theme about storytelling. And there is this assertion again, I'm no a biologist nor a psychologist, but it turns out that when people are scared, the brain function to think shuts off. And so it goes back to the idea of, if the messaging is all about fear, then you prevent people from actually thinking about the opportunities that it brings, which perhaps ties in with the key aspect of not using alarmism, for example, but the opportunities that when you're sustainable, or you look for the more sustainable option from the health, as we've discussed. So that's good. So what sustainability or ESG trend are you watching most closely right now?
Okay, I love this question, because with the trends, there is so much noise about AI and how AI can like potentially learn ways to create efficiencies, learn ways to create renewable energy. I'm watching the tidal studies. So in the ocean and in the rivers, so the power of our Mother Earth, and to reduce ourselves down to this little speck in the universe, right? We got this beautiful planet where we are here on a beautiful special place. The motion of the ocean, the tides, the rhythm of the power that comes from this gigantic untapped wealth is so interesting to me, versus drilling oil, versus the interruptive side of wind and solar. So wind is great sometimes at night, solar during the day, obviously. So those intermittent, moments of joy for getting electrons is great. But the tidal thing is really sexy to me, because it's just perpetual. Right? There's always motion. And so I think that may be a place for AI to step up the game. My biggest concern, though, is this idea of waiting for the renewable power solution, the cold fusion, the tidal, that we are drug addicts, and that we use 25% of the world's energy here in the US, with only about 4.5% of the population. So we're not only overweight in terms of fitness, we're overweight in terms of consumption of energy. More power, I don't think, is the answer. And I've been on the efficiency, basically soapbox for decades, saying We need to be smarter with how we use power, not necessarily how we just make power. And that's what concerns me a little bit is there's the trend of like more ways to create, better and better solutions to increase our energy, basically supply. And I don't know the exact data. I think it's a text story. If you search something on an internet search engine versus on the AI, the chat GPTs and the others, because of all the mainframe computers, it's something like 20 times more power that is used to just make that search because the queries are so much deeper with the AI. So again, AI may solve the problem for some clean energy, but it ends up just getting used to support the AI.
Yeah.
And I'm like this simple guy that likes to go hiking and biking and kayaking and paddleboarding and rock climbing, things that require no outside energy,
Yeah.
but human power. So I'm hoping that the ESG trend pivots back a little bit from the making more power into the saving energy, and we can find a middle ground there.
Yeah, it's a challenge with the mega trends around the sustainability or ESG or climate change and biodiversity, and the AI is compounding that challenge. So that's clearly something interesting too.
Let me jump in with just one thing
Sure.
because I referenced this disclaimer, the dietary supplement disclaimer, which I want to read, and then I'm going to tell you why I want to read it. It says these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, right? It's not like, hey, we're curing cancer. We have lots of good research on the website about the benefits and how and why, which vitamins, Harvard studies, other studies, all on where and how we can make, basically some statement about benefits. But the reason I brought up this FDA is we don't know as much about the human biome, our gut health, as we know about outer space in the ocean. And FDA is basically saying with these supplements, you guys kind of police yourself, make sure, in our case, there's almost nothing to police. It's 100% organic kale that's freeze dried and it's powderized. There's no mix of other stuff. Imagine if we spent more time looking at the food and the supplements and the way to put the right things in our body, as opposed to the pharma industry and this $1 trillion of statins and pills that try and take care of things after there's a problem, right? The high cholesterol, the diabetes. We should eat better food. The fuel we put in our bodies is more important to me than the solution to fix something after it's broken. We should make the better car rather than trying to take it into the shop, and fix it and put the right fuel in that car. So I brought up that FDA and the disclaimer because the FDA and the food triangle pyramid we had when I was a kid, oh my God, it was like paid for by the dairy lobby. There was like butter and cheese in every single meal and all the animal products as opposed to the veggies. So I'm no big conspiracy theorist, but I think that this is like basically we changed the food pyramid because it was wrong. And now we're going to learn about the food that's often high processed in the center of the grocery stores versus the perimeter that's really not as good for people as they may be presented on the box. So we have to be super sensitive to the fuel we put in our body. And I'm just frustrated in the sustainability side too that we haven't made it much more of an initiative to look at how we could make it affordable. It's easy to say, go buy grass-fed beef, the free-range chicken without the antibiotics. And if you look at the sticker price, they're not even the same. I mean, like, the organic kale is twice the cost because kale is like a sponge for pesticides and it holds it. It's one of the big 10. We have only 100% organic kale because you don't want those chemicals in your body. So I guess I have a level of frustration that like the government with all its ability has not found a way to encourage. Is it tax incentives? Is it something for the underserved community as well as everyone else to live better? Because the food capability is there and growing locally could solve a bunch of those problems as well, to have farms closer to cities.
That's which takes us to what is your thoughts or advice for purpose-driven innovation that will balance the long-term impact, which we talked about earlier on about the 7 generations. How can purpose-driven teams or companies build bold innovation but has a long-term impact and trust building as well?
Okay, so purpose driven is such a great, powerful word. And this idea of having a mission I think it's the difference between a team sport and an individual activity. The purpose of the team is to win some zero-sum game. The individual might win, but doesn't need to rely sometimes on others. And I've said sustainability is a team sport. There is no one person, there is no one technology, right? Our OnlyKale product is not going to solve the problem. It is a spoke again on the wheel. And there's a great African proverb. You can correct me if this is spoken incorrectly, but it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Love that. So this idea of purpose is going far. The seventh generation I referenced is going far. How about this? In the Gambia, I had a nonprofit, the First Light Project, and gave LED lights to a hospital general manager for 2 hospitals as a donation because they were trying to come to the U.S. and raise money for solar panels. They could only light up half of the rooms in the hospital with the solar. They wanted more solar panels. I said, can you send me the utility bills, because I think I can solve this problem without any solar panels. And the lights reduced the cost of their electric bill to where the actual number of current solar panels powered the whole building.
Right.
Saving the waste, cutting that flaw in their system, which was the old fluorescent tubes, was a solution to reduce what they were needing rather than add more electricity, which I just referenced in one of the other notes. Like, we don't need more stuff. We need to be smarter with how we use the electrons. Well, the reason this is interesting in the purpose is it took a whole team with the management of the hospital, with the auditors to count the light bulbs, with our ground team here in the US, with the nonprofit that we set up, with the manufacturing of the lights, dozens and dozens of people to make a simple action come to life. So the Charlie idea was, let's not buy you more solar panels. Let's buy you lights that use 10% of the energy. Now, boop, boop, boop. This layer of things happened over multiple weeks and months, and then we on the shipping container, off we go, moving the lights, the US-made lights to Africa. Small point, but those are the kind of things that resonate with me, and I remember and have told my kids are 19 and 15 now. Think about the team. They both are on team, play team sports. That can be a metaphor in life for business, for purpose-driven businesses, that you pull in people's skills, you find solutions to get to a goal, a long-term goal as well as short-term.
What's your final thoughts or advice for those who are listening personally about healthy eating or a purpose-driven leader? Yeah, your final thought, any area that you want.
Yeah, the final thought is basically wake up with purpose to make each day as special as possible. You spend it with the ones you love. You learn things each day. So make an effort. It might be a documentary or some podcast that's not just another rom-com movie, but try and absorb something and then try and share it. And that is really a way to engage and have a active life with the people you love, with the friends, and you will be shocked with the new friends that you make, because when you learn something and you start to share it and they riff off of it, maybe there's a nuance that they share that is counter, and don't push back, right? You got to listen. But the idea of waking up and trying to do something that is good for you, for your family, and then also has that 7th generation mindset for sustainability, is about active living and staying healthy and happy.
Awesome. A huge thank you to Charlie for your time and the incredible insights. It's been a great lesson on the triple bottom line, from the environment to the economic, to the people, the community, a whole key aspect. So if listeners like your work or the OnlyKale, where can they find more of your work?
OnlyKale.
Great. Nice and simple.
Thank you, Enoch. Really enjoyed the time together today.
Thank you. You're welcome.